Today, we are diving deep into one of the most talked about chapters in the entire New Testament, 1 Corinthians 11. We're going to do this a little differently, though. Think of this as a cinematic journey where we walk through the whole thing, scene by scene, to really lock in what's happening. Let's get started.
Okay, so our story unfolds in four main acts. First up, we'll look at a principle of order. Then we're going to see how a secret meal went terribly wrong and caused division. After that, we'll journey back to a really important night of remembrance, and we'll wrap it all up with a powerful call for self-examination. It's quite a trip, so let's jump right in.
All right, Act 1. The curtain rises and we see the Apostle Paul. Before he gets into all the drama brewing in the Corinthian church, he starts by laying down a foundational blueprint. It's all about divine structure and, well, a principle of order in worship. So Paul kicks things off in verses 1 and 2 with this really powerful idea. He says, look, imitate me, because I'm just imitating Christ. You can almost picture it like a relay race, right? The baton of truth is passed perfectly from Christ to Paul and then to the church. He even starts by praising them, telling them they're doing a good job holding on to these traditions. It's a surprisingly warm and encouraging start, and you get the feeling he's building them up before he has to tear some things down. And right here in verse 3, we get to the heart of that structure. Now, this verse has sparked so much debate over the years, but what Paul seems to be getting at here isn't about one person being more valuable than another. It's about roles and responsibilities. He's laying out this blueprint for divine order. God, then Christ, then man, then woman, all connected in this chain of relationship and harmony. Now, this principle gets super specific really fast. In verses 4 through 6, Paul says that a man who prays with his head covered, well, he dishonors his head, which is Christ. But then he says a woman who prays with her head uncovered dishonors her head, the man. And to make this point impossible to miss, he says it's as disgraceful as if her head were completely shaved. In that culture, that was a sign of deep public shame. So yeah, the imagery here is meant to be shocking. So you might be asking, okay, but why? What's the logic here? Well, in verses 7 through 9, Paul anchors his whole argument way back in the creation story. He says that man reflects the glory of God and woman reflects the glory of man. He's pointing all the way back to Genesis, to Eve being formed from Adam, to show these distinct complementary roles that he believes were set up from the very beginning. In verse 10, Paul says a woman ought to have a symbol of authority on her head, which is most likely the head covering itself. But then, and this is so important, in verses 11 and 12, he does this brilliant pivot. He makes it crystal clear that in the Lord, men and women are not independent of each other. They are completely interdependent. I mean, sure, woman came from man originally, but every man since then has come from a woman. It's a beautiful picture of just how much they rely on each other.
Then Paul does something really smart in verse 13. He kind of turns the tables and puts the question back on the Corinthians. He says, you judge for yourselves. He's not just barking orders. He's inviting them to think it through with him, to use their own cultural understanding of what was considered proper and honorable.
He starts to wrap this section up in verses 14 through 16 with one last point. He appeals to what he calls nature, which was the common idea back then that long hair was a dishonor for a man but a glory for a woman. And then, for anyone who still wants to argue the point, he just shuts it down. He says, we have no such custom, nor do the churches of God. Basically, he's saying, this is how all the churches do it. End of discussion. And just like that, the tone shifts, big time. We're moving into Act 2, and Paul pivots from this principle of order to a huge problem of disorder. A sacred meal, something that was meant to bring them together, was actually tearing them apart. Remember that praise he gave them at the beginning? Well, in verses 17 to 19, he takes it all back. He says, flat out, I do not praise you. Why? Because when they gather as a church, it's actually making things worse, not better. He's heard about deep, painful divisions. Can you imagine? It's like your doctor telling you the medicine you're taking is poison. That's how serious this is. The next few verses, 20 through 22, just paint this shocking scene of what they were calling the Lord's Supper. The wealthy church members who had plenty of free time, they'd show up early and just feast. They'd eat all the food, drink all the wine, some to the point of getting drunk. Meanwhile, the poorer members, many of whom were slaves who had to work late, would finally arrive to find nothing left. They were left hungry and publicly humiliated. Paul's question here is absolutely piercing. Do you despise the church of God and shame those who have nothing? Now, to fix this disaster, Paul doesn't just hand out a new set of rules. No, he does something much more powerful. He transports them back in time, away from the chaos in Corinth and into the quiet, sacred upper room on the night Jesus was betrayed. He's taking them back to the source. What's so crucial about verse 23 is the source and the setting. Paul says, look, this isn't my idea. I got this directly from the Lord Jesus himself. And then he sets the scene with this incredible drama. This all went down on the very night that a close friend handed him over to be killed. So this isn't just any meal. This is a final holy act right before his death. So then, in verse 24, Jesus takes the bread. He gives thanks, and he breaks it. Just picture his hands, physically tearing that loaf apart. And he says, "This is my body, which is broken for you." Suddenly that bread becomes this powerful symbol of the sacrifice he's about to make. And the command couldn't be simpler. Do this to remember me. Next, in verse 25, he takes the cup. This cup, he says, is the new covenant, sealed in my blood. Now, a covenant isn't just a promise. It's a sacred, binding agreement. Jesus is saying that his own lifeblood is the guarantee of this new, unbreakable relationship between God and humanity. And again, the instruction is the same. Do this in remembrance of me. Verse 26 is amazing because it connects the past, the present, and the future all in one. Every single time believers share in this meal, they aren't just remembering something that happened. They are actively proclaiming, like a town crier shouting the most important news, the meaning of Jesus' death. And they're supposed to keep on doing it right up until the day he returns. And that brings us to our final act. Paul has reminded them what the supper is all about. So now he gives them direct, actionable advice on how to fix their broken practice. And it all boils down to one thing: a serious call for self-examination. Verse 27 lays out the stakes, and honestly, they could not be higher. Paul warns that anyone who eats the bread or drinks the cup in an unworthy manner, which is exactly what the Corinthians were doing with their selfishness and their divisions, is guilty of sinning against the actual body and blood of the Lord. It's a heavy, powerful warning. So what's the fix? Verse 28 gives this clear three-step process. Step 1, you have to examine yourself. And this isn't just a quick glance in the mirror. It means really checking your heart, your motives, and especially your relationships with the people around you. Are you contributing to the problem? Only after that deep, honest look inside can you move on to steps 2 and 3, eating the bread and drinking the cup in a way that honors what they represent. The next couple of verses reveal the serious consequences of ignoring this. Paul says that if you participate without discerning the body, without recognizing the sacredness of it all and the unity of the community, you're basically inviting judgment on yourself. He even connects this spiritual failure to real-world problems in their church: weakness, sickness, and even some people dying. But then verses 31 and 32 show us the purpose behind this harsh judgment. See, it's not just to punish, it's meant to be corrective. It's discipline. Paul explains that if we take the time to judge ourselves first, we can avoid this divine discipline altogether. God's correction is designed to save believers, to keep them from being condemned along with the rest of the world. Paul wraps it all up with some incredibly practical advice. After all that deep theology, the solution to their chaos is, well, simple. Wait for one another. It's a command that's rooted in just basic decency and respect. Don't rush ahead. And then he adds, if you're really that hungry, eat at home first. That way, the Lord's Supper can be about what it's supposed to be about: spiritual unity, not just about filling your stomach. And so, this whole journey through a very complicated chapter ends with a question. Paul's simple instruction is turned back on us. It's not just about examining yourself in a vacuum, it's about how we treat each other. Before you come together in whatever you're doing, have you truly waited for one another? That's a question that rings just as true today as it did in ancient Corinth.